Unveiling 13 spine-chilling first-date horrors, terrifying tales of haunted encounters. The atmosphere inside Sunnyside Diner crackled with unease, a place where first dates could unknowingly cross into bone-chilling territory. Sarah nestled into the cracked vinyl booth, a sweet slice of cherry pie in front of her, while dread pooled in her stomach. She'd read tales of haunted encounters, never imagining she'd be part of one. The flickering neon lights cast eerie shadows, and the jukebox in the corner seemed to play a haunting melody, threading unease into the air. Jake sat across from her, his easy smile and confident demeanor hardly matching the weighty sensation sinking into her bones. She felt drawn to him. His voice was smooth, but beneath his surface charm, something lurked. It wasn't tea until a waitress went missing in the blink of an eye that her heart raced, catching a hint of his apprehension. The diner's vibe twisted a little, sending anxiety tickling down her spine. Outside, the night hung oppressive, cloaked in darkness, and Sarah could feel eyes watching them. The diner felt alive, its history whispering dark secrets. "Have you heard about the disappearances?" she asked, casting glimpses around the room. Just as Jake shifted nervously, her phone buzzed a static-filled call, cutting off before she could answer. Panic washed over her. Before they could escape for fresh air, they stumbled on a hidden door behind the counter, and curiosity wrapped its tendrils around Sarah's mind. Dust floated in their wake as they pushed through into a hidden passage that smelled of mildew and faded memories. It was like stepping into another realm where time stood still, the oppressive darkness itching at their heels. Each step deeper felt like diving headfirst into a legend that churned in Sarah's gut. Old newspaper clippings lined the walls, eerie tales of missing persons whose lives had vanished among ghostly whispers. Each article seemed to tease her with echoes of laughter that had long since turned to silence. Sweat trickled down Sarah's back. What if the diner wasn't just haunted by stories of the past, but also a trap waiting for new souls? Jake's silence grew heavy, his discomfort palpable. Why did he know so much about this place? Why was he so familiar with the legends? Just then, Jake's grip on her hand tightened, pulling her toward a flickering exit sign. "Don't let this place win," he muttered, but his tone lacked assurance. Pressing urgency ignited her senses. What did he know? As they stepped back into the diner, the low hum of the jukebox rang false, a sinister laughter masked in melody. Sarah's heart stopped as her phone buzzed again, revealing a chilling photo of a newly missing person, someone who looked eerily like her. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. A haze of panic clouded her thoughts. Jake's pleading stare whispered promises of safety that now felt hollow. Sewn into the diner's fabric was danger, and with it could lie their doom. The cherry pie between them had turned sour, and her laughter felt like a distant memory. She was racing against time, trapped in a nightmarish dance with fate. Would she escape the haunting grip of the diner, or was darkness destined to claim her next? The chilling truth was beginning to surface, and behind her, the shadows seemed to congeal. The moment they re-entered the diner, the air thickened, pressing in on them like an unseen force. Sarah's breath quickened as she scanned the room, every flicker of the neon light casting grotesque shapes against the walls. The clatter of dishes echoed around them, but it seemed empty, haunted by the echoes of laughter that once vibrated through the walls. Jake's grip on her hand was vice-like, and she noticed sweat glistening on his brow. "We can't stay here," he murmured, urgency threading through his voice. But where could they go? The exit felt like it was miles away, an illusion cloaked in shadows. In every corner of Sunnyside Diner, she sensed the simmering fear of the other patrons, strangers who seemed unaware of the danger lurking just beneath the surface. The jukebox continued its eerie melody. The song playing twisted and warped, lyrics whispering warnings that sent shivers down her spine. Sarah felt as if the diner had turned against them, alive and malevolent. "Did you hear that?" she breathed, eyes locked on Jake. He nodded but didn't say a word. A chilling chill crept over her like fingers brushing across her spine. She looked over her shoulder, half expecting to see someone or something hovering behind her. But nothing was there, yet she felt it, the weight of an unholy gaze. Heart racing, she turned back, locking eyes with Jake, whose expression had twisted from concern to horror. "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. But before he could respond, the lights flickered violently. A heavy thud resonated from the kitchen, followed by the unmistakable sound of dishes shattering. Gasps filled the diner as heads turned, eyes wide with disbelief. Then it happened. A woman shrieked from a booth right at the back. "The door! It's locked!" Panic erupted like a live wire, people scrambling in their booths, rushing to the exits only to find they wouldn't budge. Sarah felt vertigo set in, the walls of the diner seeming to close in on them like a vice. This was not just a haunting, it was a trap. "Jake! We have to do something!" she cried, tugging at his arm. But before he could formulate a response, the jukebox screeched, the distorted melody twisting into a cacophony that sent the diner patrons into a frenzy. Just then, a man near the counter stood up, panic painting his features. "What's happening? Somebody help!" He slammed his hands against the glass door, but it didn't budge, like it was held fast by an unseen force. The room buzzed with fear, the dread palpable, and then silence. The sound of the jukebox cut out, leaving a hollow space echoing with dread. Every eye in the diner snapped to the kitchen as an unnatural stillness fell over them. The air felt charged, heavy with foreboding. Sarah's skin prickled with fear. Jake was now staring at something behind her, his mouth slightly agape in horror. "Don't look back," he warned, his voice barely a whisper. But the instinct to look was unbearable. With every heartbeat, she could feel whatever was hiding behind her growing closer, sending cold tendrils of dread creeping into her mind. The shadows shifted, coiling like serpents, ready to lash out and pull them into the suffocating darkness. "Run!" Jake shouted suddenly, breaking the spell of silence. They didn't need a second invitation. Together, they tore toward the kitchen entrance, adrenaline fueling their escape. But as they dashed round the corner, the weight of the diner's history pressed upon them, a pulse of despair lingering in the air. Would they find a way out, or was the diner determined to claim them as the next victims? In that moment, Sarah realized they weren't just escaping the grasp of an old ghost story, something far worse was hunting them behind the veil of shadows. And as they rushed through the kitchen door, the world outside beckoned. But would it be a sanctuary, or had they traded one horror for another? The kitchen was a chaotic scene of falling pots and disarray, the smell of grease and decay mixing with the air as they burst through the door. Sarah's heart thudded heavily against her ribcage, each beat a loud reminder of the terror still gripping the diner behind them. "Where do we go?" she gasped, scanning the shadows of the kitchen. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, making the room feel like it was alive, breathing in sync with their panic. Jake took a deep breath. "We need to find a back exit or something." His eyes darted around, searching for an escape as the sounds of muffled screams and shattering glass reached them from the dining area. "Over there." Sarah pointed to a side door marked with a faded exit sign, almost hidden in the corner. They rushed toward it, the clatter of metal and the gnashing of voices echoing in their ears. When they reached the door, a cold sweat broke out on Jake's forehead. He knocked hard on it. "Hello? Is someone out there?" No response. Just the silence of desperation. "Try it," Sarah urged, her voice trembling. They both grasped the doorknob. It turned, but only halfway, stuck tight as if some invisible force was pushing back. Suddenly, the kitchen lights dimmed again, plunging them into darkness momentarily. Sarah felt her pulse race louder as shadows danced around them. Panic clawed at her throat. "We can't just stand here. Okay, okay. I'll try again. Jake braced himself, reinforcing his grip, but then something crashed to the floor behind them, a stack of heavy metal trays. They spun around, and a primal instinct kicked in. Go! He shouted, propelling Sarah forward, just as a shadow swept past them, barely missing her shoulder. They bolted through the kitchen, slamming door after door, each exit leading to more darkness. The chaos grew louder, the sounds of terror that echoed from the diner now chasing them, relentless and vengeful. Help! A voice cried from somewhere beyond the end of the hall. It was a woman, her cries piercing their frantic retreat. They hesitated, weighing their options. Do we help her? Jake's voice quaked. No. We need to keep moving. Sarah's instincts screamed at her, and deep down, she sensed that each moment spent hesitating brought them closer to whatever was lurking in the shadows. Just then, the lights flickered back on, and they spotted movement. Figures were emerging from the depths of the kitchen, twisted and grotesque, eyes lit with an unnatural glow. They weren't just patrons, they were echoes of those who had vanished from the diner in years past. Sarah! Jake's voice snapped her to attention. Run! They dashed towards a back door that loomed ominously. As they neared it, Sarah felt a chill wrap around her ankles, tugging insistently, as if inviting her to stay. Jake, it's pulling me. She gasped, her legs faltering. No. Fight it. We can't give in. With primal strength, they broke free, smashing through the door just as the shadows reached out with long, clawed fingers. They tumbled onto the ground outside, the cool air a stark contrast to the oppressive dread they had just escaped. But as they lay there, panting, barely processing what had happened, a low growl crept up from the ground beneath them. The earth seemed to shudder, vibrating in response to something deep below. And in that moment, they both realized this wasn't over. What else lay below? What had the diner claimed that was now hungry for more? Jake, we have to find out what that was, Sarah whispered, a mix of dread and determination crossing her face. He nodded, fear warring with curiosity. They faced the shelter of trees, where darkness swelled and beckoned. Would it lead them to safety, or deeper into the unimaginable? The moon hung low, casting eerie shadows over the ground. Sarah and Jake stood at the edge of the looming forest, their breaths visible in the cold air. The low growl resonated again beneath them, vibrating through the earth like a warning. What if we just run? Jake's voice trembled as he glanced back toward the diner, where the echoes of chaos still floated on the air, each scream a reminder of what they had narrowly escaped. No. We can't, Sarah insisted, her eyes darting towards the trees. We need to uncover whatever that sound is. It's like it's calling us. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, but a sliver of curiosity pushed her forward. Leaving the dim light of the diner behind felt like stepping into the depths of an ancient nightmare. They took tentative steps into the undergrowth, the leaves crunching beneath their feet, casting sharp contrasts to the silence stretching taut between them. Shadows flickered as they moved deeper, and the world around them felt alive with unseen eyes watching their every move. Do you think anyone else got out? Jake whispered, his voice low and cautious, as though speaking too loudly might invite danger. I don't know, I hope so, Sarah murmured, though doubt clawed at her throat. Each loss of light from the moon overhead felt like a loss of hope. Suddenly, the growl erupted again, louder this time, echoing through the trees. Sarah froze, her heart in her throat. What was that? She gasped, fear flooding her veins. Just keep moving, Jake urged, though the unease in his voice betrayed his own fear. They stumbled forward until the underbrush opened to an old clearing, where the moonlight bled through the canopy above, illuminating strange markings on the ground, like crude symbols carved into the earth. They were alive, pulsating gently, matching the rhythm of the growls that now surrounded them with a growing intensity. Look at these, Sarah breathed, crouching down to inspect the symbols. What do you think it means? I don't know, but it can't be good. Jake stepped closer, frowning at the odd shapes. The air grew thick as the creatures from the diner seemed to close in around them, their whispers a cacophony of desperate pleas and angry shouts, mixing as if the very ground was alive with those who had been lost. "They're trying to warn us." Sarah's voice shook as she scanned their surroundings. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed movement figures creeping closer, grotesque and fragmented, their features just out of the reach of the moonlight. "Run!" Jake screamed, grabbing her hand and dragging her back toward the trees. As they fled, branches clawed at their skin, the whispers becoming screams, echoing ominously in the chilling wind. "It's south too close. We can't let it catch us." Heart racing, they forced their legs to move faster. Suddenly, Sarah's foot snagged on a root, and she fell, the ground rushing up to meet her. Jake turned, eyes wide with panic, as he reached for her. "Sarah! Get up!" Desperation gripped him as he yanked her to her feet, and they scrambled back into the cover of the trees. But the figures were no longer just shadows, they had taken shape, rising from the ground with elongated limbs and hollow eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light. The growls transformed into laughter, an echoing chorus that chilled the blood in their veins. "We need to find a house, anything." Sarah screamed, but there was nothing but trees and the weight of darkness around them. "Look!" Jake shouted. Up ahead, a faint light flickered, drawing them in like moths to a flame. As they pushed through the trees, the unsettling feeling of being watched intensified. They stumbled into a clearing, bathed in golden light. There stood a weathered old cabin, its door slightly ajar, inviting yet foreboding. "Should we?" Sarah's voice trailed off, uncertainty curling in her gut. Jake met her gaze, both terrified and entranced. "We have to see what's inside." Their hands tightened around each other as they stepped toward the door, unaware of the presence lurking behind them, waiting for the moment they turned. Their backs, what dark secrets lay within that cabin, and would they be enough to reveal the truth about the diner, or seal their fate forever? The door creaked open, revealing a dim interior filled with dust motes dancing in the golden light. A shiver raced through Sarah as she stepped over the threshold, her heart pounding like a drum against her ribcage. Jake followed closely, both of them acutely aware of the oppressive silence that enveloped them. It felt heavy, like the air before a storm. The cabin was small, cluttered with old furniture covered by white sheets. A faded photograph hung crookedly on the wall, depicting a family that looked both familiar and unfamiliar. Their eyes seemed to follow the pair, dark and hollow, whispering secrets they could not comprehend. The chill in the air deepened, a skeletal finger trailing down Sarah's spine. "Is anyone here?" Jake called out, his voice uncertain, trembling in the confined space. The walls seemed to absorb his words, the silence swallowing them whole. As they stepped further inside, the door creaked shut behind them with a finality that sent a chill down their spines. The flickering light from a battered lantern on a small table cast wild shadows that danced around them, seeming to move with a purpose. Sarah glanced back, but the door held firm, as though it were waiting for the right moment to embrace them again. "Let us look around," she suggested, though her stomach twisted at the thought. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, they explored the cramped rooms filled with forgotten memories. A worn-out couch sat sagging under the weight of time, its fabric stained and fraying. In the corner, a rusted old landline phone rested on a table, its cord coiled like a snake. "Do you think it works?" Jake asked, eyeing the phone with suspicion. "Do we really want to find out?" Sarah whispered, forcing laughter to mask her anxiety. Suddenly, they heard a noise, a faint whisper, just beyond a door at the far end of the cabin. It was indistinct but persistent, a soft beckoning like the rustling of leaves. Their hearts skipped a beat. "Did you hear that?" Jake asked, inching closer to the door, his bravado faltering. Sarah nodded, her breath shallow. "We should stay together, something's not right here." Jake grimaced but nodded in agreement. They approached the door, a threshold that felt like crossing into another world. With a shaky hand, Jake turned the knob. It gave way with a hollow groan, and they stepped inside. The room was dark, heavy curtains drawn tight, blocking any light. A musty smell hung in the air, mixing with something sweeter, almost metallic. Flicking the light switch brought no response. They were left to rely on the dim glow left lingering from the lantern. As they hesitantly moved deeper into the space, the whispers intensified, swirling around them like a tempest. Reality slipped. They were no longer just scared teenagers, they were prey. Then, they saw it. In the far corner, a child's toy sat abandoned, a dusty, wooden rocking horse, its paint chipped and faded. Yet it was not the horse that drew their gaze, it was the silhouette of a figure lurking behind it, indistinct but undeniably present. Jake's breath hitched, fear rendering him momentarily frozen. Is that? Before they could react, the figure dissolved into shadow, unraveling like smoke as it swept toward them. The whispers turned into furious screams, a cacophony of despair that shook the very foundations of their sanity. "Run!" Sarah shouted, yanking Jake's arm. They tore away from the door, racing back into the main area of the cabin. The walls seemed to lean inwards, ready to entrap them, the whispers now angry shouts that clawed at their minds. Outside, the night still loomed, but now the woods felt different, as if the trees themselves had become part of the malevolence, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands. "We can't just stay here," Jake gasped. "Where do we go?" But as they stood on the precipice of the cabin's threshold, a horrifying realization sank in. The shadows weren't just outside, they were inescapably entwined with them. Scrambling for any way out, they clutched the dreadful truth lingering in the corners of their minds. There was something in that cabin, something that wouldn't let them leave alive. As they turned to flee once more, the door slammed shut with a deafening crash, sealing their fate. They were trapped. But in the suffocating dark, another whisper slithered through the air, chilling the very marrow of their bones. Stay forever. Where would they find the courage to confront what's waiting in the depths of this nightmare? Jake's pulse raced, pounding hard against his temples. The heavy thud matched the adrenaline coursing through him. "We need to break the window," he yelled, jabbing a finger toward the nearest pane. "No!" Sarah hissed, gripping his wrist tightly, her eyes wild with fear. "What if it's worse out there?" The volume of the whispers grew, swirling angrily around them, the very air thickening with dread. But Jake started, the reality of their situation sinking deeply like a stone. The cabin was alive, pulsing with something unseen, its intentions as dark as the shadows that clung to the corners. He could taste the metallic tang on his tongue from the anxiety, as if the very walls absorbed their fear and began to feed on it. "Come on!" In one swift motion, Sarah bolted toward the fireplace, instinctively believing if they could light a fire, it might ward off the oppressive darkness. She grabbed a handful of crumpled newspapers from a nearby table. Jake hesitated, the howls growing louder, drowning out his thoughts. He followed Sarah, searching desperately for kindling or matches among the shrouded remains of the cabin. Suddenly, he stumbled over something what looked like a faded child's shoe, tattered and small. A shudder ran down his spine as the whispers grew clearer, morphing into harsh, accusing cries. "Jake, don't!" Sarah's voice cut through the rising panic as she dropped the paper. "What's happening?" It's the cabin. He couldn't finish." The shadows outside intensified, twisting and warping, as though the dark was inhaling deeply and preparing to exhale something malevolent. "Run!" Jake shouted again, desperation clawing at his throat. They darted toward what appeared to be the back door, silent hopes of escape guiding their every step. The wood creaked beneath them, protesting, as if it knew they were trying to abandon it. They reached the door, but Jake stumbled back, horror flooding his senses. The handle was turning on its own. Something was manipulating the very essence of the cabin, determined to keep them inside. "No! Not again!" Sarah screamed. She gripped Jake's arm, her face twisted in terror. "What do we do? What do we do?" "Maybe the phone." Jake fumbled back toward the rusted landline, desperation spurring him forward. He remembered the last thread of hope, a way to connect with the outside world. If they could just reach someone. Don't. It's not safe. But Sarah's voice was drowned out by a chilling laughter echoing through the walls, scratching like nails on glass. Without thinking, Jake snatched the receiver, cradling it to his ear. "Hello? Hello?" His voice trembled, yet the silence responded back, thick like molasses, dragging the fear deeper into his chest. Then a breath, cold and wet. The whispering escalated to a scream, pressing against Jake's ears like an unbearable force. Stay forever. He dropped the phone, fear coursing through him like poison. They were ensnared. The shadows crawled closer, enveloping them in an inky embrace. He turned to Sarah, her eyes wide with horror. "What if we?" she started, but the floorboards beneath them suddenly shook. With a deafening crash, the walls shuddered, a cacophony of shattering glass and ancient wood breaking all around them. The cabin felt like it was alive, twisting and contorting as though it meant to consume them wholly. "It's trying to keep us," Jake yelled, panic surging through his veins. But the whispers now formed words, each syllable dripping with darkness, echoing back a chilling truth that twisted in their minds: "You will stay. You are mine." With a last burst of resolve, Jake grabbed Sarah's hand. They turned toward the nearest window, bracing for impact. They had to get out. As he pounded a fist against the glass, the whispers crescendoed to a shriek that rocked the room, rattling their bones. The shadows advanced, pressing closer, as if eager to silence their frantic escape once and for all. The glass shattered just as the shadows lunged, the darkness reaching for them, clawing. In that moment, they leapt forward. The world outside welcomed them, yet the soft touch of the cool air was a twisted reminder that the chase was far from over. But lurking in the cacophony of hope and chaos was one final chilling promise: "You cannot escape. We are closer than you think." Jake and Sarah stumbled into the cool night, gasping for breath. The darkness enveloped them, but it felt different now. The suffocating weight of the cabin had lifted, yet an uneasy chill settled around their shoulders like a predator's gaze. Did we get away?" Sarah panted, her wide eyes darting around the tree line, searching for a sign of safety. "I think so," Jake replied, though doubt crept into his voice. Their escape felt too easy. The whispers, the darkness, it wasn't over. He could almost hear the cabin snarling, its fury boiling just beneath the surface. "Let us keep moving. We can't stay here." With a firm grip on her hand, he propelled them forward, away from the cabin's malevolent grip. Every few moments, Jake glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see the bleed of shadows pouring through the broken window, chasing them down with an insatiable hunger. They sprinted through the woods, branches snatching at their clothes and skin, tearing away bits of reality. "Where are we going?" Sarah cried, trying to keep pace with him. "Just away," Jake shouted, his heart hammering like a drum. They had to put ground between them and that cursed place. But it wasn't long before they slowed, their breaths heavy, fear of the dark mingling with exhaustion. Behind them, the shadows danced, flickering just out of the reach of their vision. They found a grove littered with stones, their surfaces smooth and cold, a temporary refuge in the suffocating blackness. "What are we even running from?" Sarah gasped, dropping down against a rock. Jake shook his head. "I don't know, but I can feel it. Something is still hunting us." As if in response, the wind shifted, tugging at their clothes like restless fingers. The trees began to whistle a low haunting tune, sending prickles crawling down Jake's spine. "Maybe we can find a road or someone who can help." He rose slowly, scanning the area for any sign of civilization, praying for a flicker of light in the oppressive dark. "Look!" Sarah pointed toward a faint glow in the distance. Relief surged through him, almost intoxicating. "Let us go." They took off again, driven by an urgency that was both hope and dread. The light pulsed, illuminating their path, yet with each step, the whispers grew louder, swirling in a frantic symphony around them. Suddenly, a bone-chilling scream split the air. It was distant and haunting, echoed back by the trees. Their hearts synchronized in terror, minds racing with dark possibilities. "What was that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know." "Just keep moving," Jake demanded, though the conviction in his tone faltered. The glow ahead flickered like a dying star. Hidden fears erupted as it felt closer yet infinitely far away. The shadows thickened, wrapping around them like a live thing. The whispers morphed into angry voices, accusing and taunting. "You can't leave, we want you back forever." The voice churned Jake's stomach with nausea. He stumbled, blinking against the encroaching darkness. Each step forward felt like wading through molasses, the weight of the air thickening, pressing down. "Jake!" Sarah's voice broke through the fog of fear. She grabbed his arm, pulling him along. "This way. We have to find the light." They pushed on, the glow fighting against the darkness, a beacon of their last hope. But as they neared, the light kept shifting. It appeared to be retreating, drawing them further into the woods, rather than delivering them to safety. Then, they heard it, the sound of laughter, unnatural and twisted, that rang out from the shadows. A chorus of mocking voices erupted, a cruel cacophony promising pain. "No, no." Jake's mind raced, panic flooding his veins. "What if it's a trap?" Sarah whispered. "That's exactly what it is." He swallowed hard, dread seizing every breath. As they hesitated, the darkness closed in around them, wrapping tighter. The malicious whispers shifted, now echoing their doubts and fears, taunting them with nightmarish clarity. "You'll never escape." Surrender. Jake felt the weight of hopelessness dragging him down. But beneath it lay a flicker of determination. There had to be a way out. They couldn't give in. He jerked Sarah's hand, adrenaline surging again. "We have to. Together." But as they moved closer to the light, something shifted behind them, a creeping dread that made their skin crawl. It was like the very shadows had teeth, ready to chew them whole if they became too slow. In the brush behind, the darkness writhed, coiling like a serpent, hungry, waiting. With a surge of sentiment, Jake made a choice. They would stand and fight if they had to. He turned to face the monster, every fiber of his being trembling with resolve. "Now! Go!" he yelled, urging Sarah onward as the shadows lunged at them from the trees, but as they broke into a sprint, the flickering lights suddenly dimmed, plunging them into a consuming abyss. "Jake! What's happening?" Sarah's panic mirrored his own. As the darkness closed around them, the last thing he heard before everything faded to black was one final whisper that chilled him to the bone: "You'll wish you never left." They were not done yet. They had been deceived, and deep within that betrayal lay an even deeper horror waiting to be uncovered. Jake gasped, awake, the world around him a thick shroud of blackness. He blinked, trying to focus, but the night wrapped its fingers around him, squeezing the breath from his lungs. He felt the cold ground against his cheek, the remnants of panic racing through his veins like ice water. "Sarah!" he shouted, the name torn from his throat. A second passed, then a heavy silence. He pushed himself up, scanning the murky surroundings. Trees loomed like sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky. The air felt charged, thick with the promise of danger, but there was no sign of Sarah. Had the shadows taken her? Terror shot through him. "Sarah!" he called again, his voice echoing back at him, warped and foreign, as if the darkness were mocking him. Jake stumbled to his feet and turned in circles, fighting against the rising tide of fear. The flickering glow that had drawn them in was gone, leaving nothing but emptiness in its wake. He could hear it now, the soft murmurs creeping from the shadows. Each whispered syllable scraped against his sanity. "You left her, you'll pay." He rubbed his temples, panic swirling inside him. Where had Sarah gone? Had she succumbed to the whispers, pulled into the darkness? No, he couldn't accept that. He needed to find her. Just then, a low growl slithered through the night air, making the hairs on his neck stand upright. He froze, straining to listen. It was close, dangerously close. The shadows shifted, almost forming shapes that slithered and crept toward him. "Get it together, Jake," he muttered to himself, shaking his head to clear the fog of despair. He needed to focus. Taking a deep breath, he pressed forward, heart pounding like a drum in a haunted parade. "Sarah!" he yelled once more, a desperate plea that hung in the air. His fear mounted with each passing moment, melding with a primal instinct to survive. The ground beneath him crunched, and the laughter returned, louder, richer with malice. It slithered through the trees, creeping into the corners of his mind. He staggered, feeling the weight of despair claw at him, desperate to drag him down into the dark. Just when he thought he couldn't take it anymore, he spotted a flicker, dim, almost ghostly, but it was a light. It pulsed like a heartbeat, beckoning him forward, even as a deep-seated dread washed over him. He moved slowly, heart pounding against his ribs. The laughter faded, replaced by an eerie silence. As he stepped closer to the glow, he noticed shadows darting at the edges, swirling and weaving like a phantom dance. Were they watching him? Fear clawed at him from every direction, but he had to know if Sarah was near. He reached the light and found it wasn't a beacon at all. It was a lantern, its glass cracked and dirty, hanging from a gnarled branch. "Sarah!" he called, desperation lacing his voice. And then he saw her figure, partially obscured by the shadows. She stood still, her face pale and expressionless, like a doll left to gather dust. A chill coursed through him like ice water. "Sarah!" He rushed toward her, but the shadows tightened around him, curling like smoke. "Jake," her voice was a whisper, trembling and distant. The lantern dimmed, flickering enough for him to see her eyes, wide with a fear that mirrored his own. "Thank God, I thought I lost you." He reached out, but the shadows between them thickened, wrapping around his arms, pulling him back. "Don't," she gasped, her voice raw, trembling with fear. "It wants you to stay." "What are you talking about?" Panic laced his words. "We can't stay here." The shadows surged, and he felt them clawing up his legs, wrapping around him like chains. He fought against the darkness, but it was relentless. The whispers returned, louder this time, an unholy choir. "You belong to the dark forever, Sarah, please. We have to fight." But her eyes flickered, fear replaced by something else, something like acceptance. "No!" Jake shouted, trying to pull her back into the light. "I want to leave you." Suddenly, a booming voice erupted from the depths of the forest, shaking the ground beneath them. "Join us together, you will never flee." And for a moment, the shadows parted, revealing a path back into the heart of the woods. But beyond that threshold, a larger darkness loomed, waiting with arms wide open. Jake felt the cords of darkness tighten around him, squeezing the breath from his lungs. He could either embrace the horrors waiting to be unveiled, or fight against an enemy that grew stronger with despair. "Choose." The voice roared, with a new surge of determination. He turned to Sarah, desperation igniting a flame in his chest. "We can't give in." But she stood frozen, her gaze distant, the light fading. "Fight with me, Sarah." And in that moment, the forest fell eerily silent as they waited for the inevitable choice to reveal itself. What lay ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain: there was no true escape from the darkness without a sacrifice. What would they choose, and was the promise of light worth the cost? A shudder rippled through Jake, the darkness trying to pull him into its cold embrace. It was suffocating, tightening like a noose around his throat. Desperation clawed at his chest. "Sarah!" he cried, struggling against the weight of shadows as they coiled around him, seeping into his mind like poison. "Jake," her voice trembled, breaking like glass in the air. "You have to let me go." "No." His voice cracked, raw. The shadows whispered again, spinning tales of despair and foreboding, tempting him with promises of peace if he would just surrender. "I want to leave you to this." Yet as he tugged against the shadowy chains, he could see Sarah's expression, a muted acceptance. It shattered something deep inside him. He was losing her. Fight it, Sarah. Fight them. Her eyes flickered with a hint of resistance, then dulled. I don't know if I can. The lantern's light flickered even dimmer, barely illuminating the small space between them. Panic surged through Jake, overriding logic. This wasn't a choice, it was a trap. He had to break free, had to save Sarah. Jake closed his eyes tight, summoning every ounce of strength he had. The shadows tugged, sharp pain biting into his skin, but he pushed through. I want to be yours. He shouted, feeling the pull of desperation. As if in response, a thunderous roar echoed through the trees, the voice booming like an angry storm. You cannot resist. Join us. With a newfound ferocity, Jake wrenched himself away from the grasping shadows, breaking free for just a breath. He lunged for Sarah, grabbing her wrist. Let us run. But she didn't move. Jake, before she could finish, a surge of darkness erupted from the forest floor, sweeping toward them like a tidal wave. It engulfed the lantern, snuffing out its feeble light, leaving them in blinding, suffocating blackness. Retreating footsteps whispered around him, the trees shifting like malevolent giants. You cannot escape the darkness. Let her go. Jake screamed. He stumbled backward, dragging Sarah with him, but the shadows were relentless. Each jolt sent a wave of terror coursing through him, blinding him with despair. Sarah's voice, now muffled and weak, seemed to float distant from him. Panic surged anew, but the whispers grew in volume, a cacophony of malicious delight, wrapping around his mind. Leave her to us, join us and be free. Their laughter pierced his thoughts, a dark serenade that wrapped his heart in a vice. Jake gasped, struggling to breathe as the shadows clawed at his legs, creeping ever higher. Don't listen. He shouted into the darkness. You don't want her. You want us both. Their cold laughter cascaded around him, tantalizing and mocking. Your fate is already sealed. Desperation pulsed through his veins, urging him forward. Then he remembered the lantern, that fragile hope, a flicker of light that once existed. Stay close. He shouted, though it felt futile. He could feel the pull of despair all around them, ensnaring Sarah and him, trying to separate them as the shadows loomed larger. He tried to focus, reaching frantically into his pocket, gripping the rough wood of his pendant, a memento from a time before the dark. Could it help? Remember light. A faint whisper broke through the chaos, seeping into his mind. In the pitch blackness, he clutched the pendant tighter. Focus on the light. He shouted, even as the darkness throbbed and pulsed around him. Abruptly, a glow ignited in the distance, a speck of hope flickering through the suffocating void. Drawing on every ounce of himself, he pulled on it, channeling it through his voice. Sarah, come with me. But the whispers swelled, and from all sides they cried, you will not take her. She is ours. He felt Sarah slackening her grip, a wave of desperation crashing over him. No. He cried. Don't leave me. Together. But the shadows shifted, pulling him along an unseen path, engulfing him in a clamoring chaos that threatened to drown him. Choose now. The voice boomed, choose your fate. As he lunged toward the light, the ground trembled beneath him, sending a deep terror coursing through his body. Perhaps the choice was never his to make. Was there a way to fight back, or were they already too late? The shadows tightened, each whisper clawing through the dark, and Jake realized the true horror was just beginning. Jake felt as if he were teetering at the edge of an abyss, a yawning chasm that beckoned him into its depths. In that moment, he understood, the shadows were not simply impediments or lingering echoes of the diner's victims. They were decision-makers, presenting him with a choice between darkness and light, surrender and resistance, despair and hope. Sarah! He shouted, strain churning his gut as the shadowy tendrils tightened around him, pulling him backward. We can't give in. Panic rose within him like a tempest, the memories of laughter, joy, and simple moments of being together rushing back like a flood. She couldn't fall into this abyss, couldn't let the darkness drown out everything they had fought for. Jake! Her voice, strained and trembling, sliced through the chaos, pulling him back just enough to remember the most important truth: love was stronger than any darkness. With a fierce battle cry, he released his hold on fear and submerged himself into the memories they had forged. He envisioned the golden summer days filled with laughter, the warmth of her smile, the magic of their whispered secrets shared under starlit skies. The surge of emotion ignited a flame within him, pushing back against the shadows clawing at him. "You can't have her!" he roared, and with every ounce of strength, he flung his heart toward Sarah, reaching for her with everything he had. Suddenly, the shadows shrieked, a cacophony of rage. They writhed in response to his defiance, but behind that fury, he glimpsed a flicker of clarity and unyielding light. Taking a deep breath, he summoned the warmth of that light to envelop them both, wielding it like a sword against the icy tendrils of despair. "Together!" he yelled, and the activation of that simple word fueled the ancient magic binding them. The shadows recoiled momentarily, and in that brief reprieve, he felt Sarah's hand grip his tightly, her frightened eyes locking onto his. "Together!" she echoed, finding strength in his determination. With that utterance, a swell of brilliance erupted around them, illuminating the darkness in violent waves. The light surged, buoying their spirits and forcing the shadows to disperse like mist in sunlight. In an explosion of glowing force, the shimmering barrier pushed against the lurking dread, expanding to envelop everything in sight. As the light washed over the trees, shifting the fabric of reality, Sarah's fear cracked. She ripped free from the grasping shadows, stepping forward beside Jake. The two combined their will, creating a bond that sent the dark snapping away like a broken thread. "Stay away!" Jake shouted as they pressed onward, the shadows gasping at the sudden loss of their prey. The whispers diminished to panicked whines, elements of anguish and fury spilling through the echoing woods, the figures retreating, dimming, with their own fears hanging in the air like fog. They ran, propelled forward by the newfound sense of purpose. The world around them shimmered, each branch glowed, each leaf sparked with relief, and together they dashed through the underbrush, forcibly tearing open a path toward what felt like salvation. As they reached a clearing, a vibrant dawn burst overhead, warmth spilling across their weary bodies. The trees around them stood tall, vibrant with life, and the darkness that had loomed so heavily began to recede, unraveling like a forgotten nightmare. Finally collapsing to the ground, their bodies trembling with adrenaline, they shared a look, one of relief and triumph. They had overcome, they were alive, and the shadows were driven back, but they understood that the struggle had not vanished entirely. But they had each other, and in that truth lay the real power. The connection between them transcended fear, allowing hope to flourish anew. "We did it," Jake breathed, a smile breaking across his face despite the remnants of terror clinging to their clothes. "Together," Sarah whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek as joy flourished amid the remnants of their fear. As they embraced, a sense of finality surrounded them, a silent acknowledgement of the battle waged and won. They knew darkness could return, but it would loom smaller now, eclipsed by the light they had ignited together. With the first rays of dawn washing over them and the shadows dissipating like smoke, they walked hand in hand toward the path leading out of the woods, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The influence of the diner would remain a haunting legacy, but now it served only as a reminder of their strength, as they ventured forward into a world alive with promise. And in that land of light, they strode together, fearless, hopeful, and unbroken. You need to subscribe now to the channel to catch the next exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Your support matters. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this thrilling conclusion. Only true fans understand how vital it is to support the channel through these actions.